Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco, Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. And it's just Marco here once again. This is going to be a bit of a strange video. It's sort of a promotional video mixed with my own sort of review. I don't know, it gets more and more awkward for me every time I do like a quote unquote review of my own work. Like when I did a review of Super Dumbasses, I think that it was it was a promotional thing, and it was a bit of a review for me to vent out my frustrations and kind of make sure that people go into it with the correct context, because it really isn't a complete movie, and it turned into a train wreck, and that's my fault for making it into a train wreck and not, being smart enough to figure out how to make it a complete film. But still, it is really good. I mean, I just rewatched some clips this morning, and it really holds up. Like, it's just so funny, the little touches, the little subtle things, like the Earth Day barbecue. Earth Day was yesterday, and the little touch of Vichyssoise. He walks over to the grill, and he puts a hamburger on the grill, and he leaves the gross paper thing on the hamburger and doesn't take it off until Jack tells him to. And it's like, it's just so funny and so just subtle and funny. It's just it it's so funny to me, like, little things like that. And that's what I really wanted that movie to be, was sort of a mix of telling a story and having like a narrative around friends hanging out, and then all in that narrative it just gets all screwed up and effed up because the people are just a little low IQ, and they're just a little, goofy and funny characters. And so they kind of like, they add in all their own little quirks that kind of ruin the narrative. And that was my sort of intent with the movie. And yeah, it holds up to me. Like, it's still as good as it was last year. In fact, it's a little better because now I'm not as frustrated that it ended so terribly and that I screwed up the movie so much by not really planning and just kind of like jumping into it, like in Kick-Ass, when that guy thinks that he's going to fly and then he just crashes into the car with that stupid wingsuit he made. He probably didn't even test it or anything. He just jumped off the top of a building. So yeah, this book, The Super Dumbass Director, is the one I'm reviewing. It's a fucked up memoir. That's what I call it. I really like it. I think that sorry, it's so awkward to talk like this. I think I like my own work. Like, gee whiz, like, I wonder why. But what I really wanted it to be was, I noticed in the Super Dumbasses movie that the movie focuses a lot on Jack and Vichyssoise. And I wanted to make something that you could have as a companion, so that you could, focus on me. Because I wasn't focused on much in the movie. I didn't really have a character who was, authentic to me. They were being completely real. They weren't acting at all. The only one acting was me. And so you really didn't get to see me in the movie. You didn't get to see the full side of me. You didn't really get to see me as a character as you would if someone else was directing it and I was just being myself. Because I was trying to put on a performance and a character, and I was clearly the best part of the movie, according to people who have seen the movie. And with this book, I really wanted it to be about me and be about like an authentic look at me without being like an over-the-top character. I really wanted it to be honest. I wanted it to be raw, and sort of like just for you to see the full picture and sort of see like the build up to the making of that movie and sort of see like the journey and then sort of what it all culminated in and how it is going to affect the future. And I really wanted to make like something good. And I thought actually the book is the best thing to come out of the movie, in my opinion, because in my opinion, my story, it has a lot more characters that are interesting, a lot more emotion, a lot more realness, a lot more relationships that are better, like, just in terms of relationships alone, like, the different relationships throughout the book are really, really good studies on relationships. There's this one character, and I don't want to give anything away because I know people haven't read it, listened to it as of now. Because I should say this, the book, it is already out on YouTube for free as a 13-part audiobook. And it also has a prologue, which I hope you listen to first. And it is 13 parts. It's 11 hours and a half long. And it is me reading the book and me sort of doing it off the cuff, flubbing, improving, having fun, having a couple of drinks here and there when I read to make it more fun and loose. And it's a really enjoyable experience if you're looking for something personal and enjoyable and sort of comforting, just listening to someone read their own story. There's just something comforting about that. I've been listening to Katharine Hepburn's memoir, and she did the same thing where she was reading her own book, and it was very personal, and I liked it. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I also, I listened to The Disaster Artist, which was also very, very good. The way that he read that, it was so personal and so funny, and the little touches he added, like he did perfect impressions of his friends and people, and, it really inspired me. And so you can listen to the audiobook now, or you can wait until May the 2nd, hopefully, May the 2nd, when it will come out on Amazon. And I think it'll just be an ebook for now. I think so. I haven't decided yet, but that is the plan. And another thing that's interesting is that both versions have exclusive content that aren't in the other version. So there are stories in the audiobook that aren't in the physical Amazon release. There are stories that are in the Amazon release that aren't in the audiobook. So, So, basically, you got to read both to get the full picture if you really, really want to know everything. And, I didn't even put everything. That's the other thing, is that part of the fun thing about this book was having to cut stuff out of my own life and, and almost like edit my own life into a narrative as much as possible. And that was part of the fun. So, yeah. This book, I was sort of inspired by The Disaster Artist. I was inspired by Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I would basically describe the book as Diary of a Wimpy Kid meets The Disaster Artist. And I would also say that I was inspired. The one book that I thought about the most while writing was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. In the same way that was only the first book in a series that was just setting up the world, you meet all the characters, they go through a little journey. To me, that's what this book was. This book was my Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Of course, it's not as good as that book, obviously, but just in terms of like the type of story, it's a very origin heavy, like beginner adventure type of book, and it doesn't really, nothing really ever that big happens. It's just a very personal, small scale story, and I think that there's something fun about that. I love reading other people's stories and hearing about other people's perspectives, And this is certainly a different one for sure. And I came to realize that while writing and finishing it up, that I am sort of a mix of R.L. Stine and Hank Moody from Californication. And I don't care, honestly. Like, I don't care. Like, that's good. Sounds good to me. Like, I love Hank Moody. Californication is my favorite show of all time. It's always been a huge influence on me, and I love everything about it. I really wish that it had continued, because it really, it did not end on a good note. It really ended on like a big, it just was weak and pathetic of an ending. But the character, I really identify with him a lot. What he goes through, all the struggles and relationship problems he goes through, and just, having to deal with one's own flaws is a big part of life. And I think that really comes through in his story, and then in this book is, dealing with your own struggles and your own weaknesses, and having to sort of, realize that you have weaknesses too. Like, because first you have to realize you have weaknesses, and then you have to deal with them. And if you don't deal with them, you're basically knowingly living a life of trash. And then, in terms of R.L. Stine, I had the most amazing summer last year after the filming of the movie ended, which I thought the filming was going to take all summer. And so they basically screwed me. I mean, I was expecting the whole summer to just be filming. And I thought I was going to have thousands of hours of footage. But we only ended up filming for like a little tiny bit of the summer. Like, we stopped in the early part of June. I mean, that's really bad. Or no, wait, no, we stopped in May. And then we like hung out one last time in early June, and that was it. So it really threw me off. It really was a big downer. And so what I did was I sort of had this routine that really helped me with writing, and I would recommend it to you if you are writing something or want to write something, which I would also be interested in checking out. Every day I would get up and I would listen to Goosebumps. I would listen to a Goosebumps book, a new one every single day, maybe two a day sometimes, because they're only like an hour and a half long each. And I did that for like months. I did it for 2 months. And it was like the greatest summer experience I've ever had, almost. Next to a couple I talk about in the book. And it was just so amazingly fun to, listen to these stories that, although they're not very good, a lot of them, the writing I love the simplistic writing, but there's a lot of fun description, and the characterization of some monster characters is really good. There's a lot of really smart horrific moments, like in Stay Out of the Basement. I'll never forget the moment when the kids are playing frisbee with their father, and then one of them throws the frisbee and knocks the cap off the dad's head, and he just stands there with this gasp as they see this like plant infested head at this creepy, monstrous, disgusting, like it was just probably one of the most horrifying things I've ever heard about. Like, it was so creepy and terrifying to me. And it really, like, that was like a jaw-dropping, scary moment just by listening to a robot off of Google read a book. Because what I did was I listened to all the free audiobooks on YouTube that are all read by a robot for the most part. And then I also listened to John B., a.k.a. Smooth Chocolate. I listened to his audiobooks too, because he does a really good job. And I loved reading A Cuckoo Clock of Doom with him. That was the best reading that he's done. And I've listened to several of his, and he's really, really good. He's such a good reader, and he's such a good YouTuber. And so it was a really fun experience, and it really inspired me listening to books every day to just write myself. And I think that really is true for anything, that if you get into a habit of thinking about the certain thing and of just seeing other people do the certain thing, that it'll make you do that certain thing too. Because that's what happened when I wrote my first script. It took me all the way until the end of high school to write my first feature-length script. And I was able to do it because I wrote in creative writing class every day. I wrote every day. And that habit of writing instilled in me. And so that made me able to finish my first script, was that habit of writing, and the habit of listening to Goosebumps books helped me write this story. Now, the book itself, I will warn you, it's very explicit. I've said that a million times because especially the people around me, the people who know me, they're very sensitive types of people. They're still kind of living in the first grade. So, they have a problem with that kind of stuff. And a lot of people do nowadays. It's become a very serious problem with society. And that's part of why I wanted to write this book too. Was whenever I make anything, I always want to make things that offend people and make people uncomfortable and upset, because it'll break their little bubble of bullshit. Nowadays we have all these adults who are still children. We have all these adults who, they can't grow up. They can't, become an adult anymore because they're too busy thinking about children's things like Marvel movies and stuff like that. And it's just become a huge problem. And it's really infested every area of society, to the point of where, like, now adults, they see like two human people kissing and they say, "Ew, that's sexualization, that's evil, take that off, that's gross." And that's the same type of thing that kids would say in grade school. And it's really because adults are not adults anymore. They're children. They're all children. They're all a bunch of fucking children. And I think that this book, it really shows you, it shows you like back in the, it shows you like a better, it basically puts a filter of what used to be in terms of comedy over everything. There's this constant excuse nowadays of like, oh, it's 2022. So that means we can't say jokes anymore. We can't say certain things anymore because we're going to offend people. And we can't do this type of horror anymore. We can't do these types of movies anymore because we don't want to offend anybody. And so my book actually doesn't give a fuck. Nothing in my book gives a fuck, because it's just all the honest to goodness story. It was such a fun book to write. And I think part of why I love the story is because I can see it's really weird. Like, the weirdest part of the book was after I finished it and I was reading it out loud for the audiobook, because I realized that this, weirdly enough, I could see a story arc in there. I could see a character arc in there. And most importantly, the thing that kind of made me a little bit happier was I could see all these setups for payoffs. I could see, oh, even though that moment seems like a really low moment, it feels like that moment is going to pay off in a big way later on. And especially near the end, there's this sort of event that I talk about going to, and I never end up going to it. And it's just a very sad thing to read about, because it's just, I don't know, it's sort of like the loss of, in this book, a lot of the focus in this book is sort of the loss of innocence that you go through as you grow up, and the loss of innocence that you go through when you realize that, like, not everything's going to be perfect. People aren't perfect. You aren't perfect. Nothing's perfect. It's like that Courage the Cowardly Dog moment where that weird blue creature was like, "You are not perfect. Courage." Remember that? That was the weirdest fuck. But it makes sense. It's like, it's such a good message, and I really think that's the theme of the story. The main theme is nothing is perfect, no one is perfect, and sort of the loss of innocence that you go through as you grow up. And sort of this big event, it was a big deal for me, just in terms of, like, I had a very abnormal sort of growing up because of certain things that happened. And so sort of I was excited for this one last thing that would just be like, oh, that one normal thing that I had, that I can say, like, yeah, there's that one normal event that happened, and then I don't end up going to it, and it's just a really sad thing. That was probably the hardest chapter to write, actually. It was the hardest chapter. It was very hard to write. It was sort of like, it's like, how do you, like, write this without just wanting to laugh at how sad it is, indirectly. But now that I look back, it just seems like a setup for a payoff later on. Like, it really does. It's like, it's the perfect setup for, like, a happy payoff later on somewhere, at certain points. And I won't get into any details with that. And the other theme in this book that I really wanted to focus on was not giving up. And I think that also really, really came through until the very end. Because at the end of the book, even though my friends sort of gave up on the movie, I didn't give up on the movie. I released it. It's there on YouTube. I jimmied up an ending. I created sort of a false ending that kind of, it's sort of like, oh, this is it? What a crappy ending this was. But it's still an ending, and it's like, it kind of does hold the movie together because it sort of reflects on the rest of the movie. And so, the theme of never giving up, that's always been a huge problem for me. I've known about it, like, ever since middle school. Like, that's how bad it is. Like, it's not really, it's just a problem of, like, I'll do stuff and I'll be really hard on working on it, and then I'll just give up and not care anymore, and I'll just move on to the next thing. And so I sort of have that issue. And so doing this movie and doing this book, it's really helped me sort of change that a little bit to now I can say, like, oh, I did those things. Like, so I'm not a total failure to where I give up all the time to everything, and so I really think the theme of not giving up and the message of not giving up is important, because a lot of people, it's very easy to just give up. It's hard to move on and to still, try until you get it right. And I think that message is sort of the big theme. It really, that's the message I hope that people take away. The details don't even matter. Like, you could change all these details to basically, like, to take out all the explicit stuff. You could take out all the weird stuff. Like, none of that matters. Like, that's why I push them so hard in this book. It's very explicit, very crude, and gross at certain times. And the reason why I do that is because it shouldn't matter. Like, nobody should complain and care about, because it just shows that they focus on the wrong things. Like, why are you focusing on the fact that I talked about some XXX thing when you should be focusing on the fact that I talked about how I did bowling, and even though I had basically a different team every year, I ended up almost getting a 300. I got a 288 finally. And so I almost got a perfect score. And the fact that I made that transformation in spite of not having a good team, in spite of not really practicing a lot, I still got to that high mark. And so that is the thing I want people to take away. And I really enjoyed this book. You know, there's so many fun chapters of like just different relationships. Like I love the relationship with me and Amos and Druglin, you know, with us sort of. I sort of look at the book in a 3-act structure. The first act is the innocent, you know, childhood where you have a lot of dreams. Everything is really shiny and shimmering and glimmering, and you know, everything is sort of happy and, you know, just looking into the future. You know, there are some sad things, but that's to be expected. And it all ends really with I'm not going to spoil it. It all ends with a certain thing happening in middle school. And then that starts the sort of dark low point where everything seems sort of rough and hard and tough. And that is sort of the second act. And then the last act is very short because it feels like the setup for more. And that is basically where I'm out of high school and I'm trying to get this filmmaking dream started. And the start of the Super Dumbasses, you know, that was a very exciting thing for me because I thought, you know, I can just go hang out with these guys. And I can go, you know, have fun and just, you know, have a laugh and just do fun things and make that a movie. Like, yeah, that sounds like a fun idea to me, like one time to do that, like a hangout movie. So I really think that those are the 3 acts. My favorite part of the book, probably, you know, it's tough. I really loved how earlier on in the book, okay, I'll give the book a grade and then I'll go into spoilers because I want to talk about a few spoilers to just let you guys know what my favorite moments of the book were. And then I'd like to hear yours too if you have any. And then what are your least favorite moments too? I would rate this book, it's tough because I do think that I had a bit of an issue with description. There were a lot of moments where I really wanted to describe things more, but I felt like if I did, it would be inauthentic. And I felt like if I did, it would sort of go beyond the truth into the world of fiction. And I didn't want it to feel fictionalized in any way. I wanted it to feel real. And so I can't give it an A. I have to give it a B+. And I think it is a high B+. And I think that if I had more of the description, if I was able to maybe interview some other people and see if they have any other memories, you know, that would have taken a lot more research time. You know, I literally just remembered everything myself. You know, I just went back and I was like, okay, I'm remembering that. I'm kind of looking around for stuff to remember. And so it was all my memory. You know, none of it was anyone else's really, except for a little bit with my friend TJ. He has a little bit of things that I talked about in the book that, you know, they're all his little experiences too, his weird experiences with certain things. So I really do think that the book struggled a little bit with description. And I think that description really would have helped because there were a lot of moments that were really high moments for me that I wanted to feel more. And I wanted to sort of live in the shoes of those moments instead of sort of feeling like like a ghost looking back on those moments, you know, like Scrooge being taken back and shown like the Christmas past or something. You know, that's sort of what it ended up like, unfortunately. And I also think that the book had a little bit of an issue of getting to the heart of my character in terms of getting into my head. Because there's a lot of times in the book where I make certain questionable choices and it feels like I don't really properly explain why I make questionable choices sometimes and sort of what's going through my head. And so those two things are the biggest issues of it for me. And I would also say I talk about it in the book. I make fun of it. The fact that there's a lot of setups for payoffs that are in the book itself, but they don't ever pay off. And I thought that that was very dissatisfying, but there's really nothing I can do about it because that's what really happened. You know, I'm not going to make up that, you know, I did something at a certain point and I had a lot of fun and blah, blah, blah when it didn't happen. You know, I'm not going to lie as much because it's supposed to be my story. So now for spoilers,